Defense Ministry body responsible for Palestinian civilian affairs hit out and said, from a UN official, we would expect at least to be more accurate.
For more on this, I am now being joined by a retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel with 21 years of service. He is also the host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube, and he's joining me live from Sterling, Virginia. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. It's always great to talk to you. There's been a string of attacks on ships in the Red Sea by Houthi rebels, a British ship, a U.S. Navy warship, a container ship. What are the factors that makes this stretch so vulnerable commercially and militarily? And from your experience, how crucial is this waterway?
Well, it's extremely vital. I think you just pointed out there that 10% of the world's trade transits through that area. That's a massive amount when you're talking on a global scale. And of course, it affects nations all throughout that region of the earth. But the real priority, the real problem is, of course, it's just its geographic location, and it's near Israel, and it's between some of these Houthi rebels and the Israeli forces, and of course, in the Palestinian people that they say that they're trying to protect. The Houthi rebels are doing whatever they can. They're just trying to cause mayhem and chaos. They're trying to cause economic harm to Israel, because I'm sure that their intent is not to sink ships, because I don't think they have much capacity to do that. But they do have enough capacity to cause problems. And of course, the one of the big issues for trade is the insurance that it costs for ships to transit a given area. And if the threat is deemed higher, then the insurance will be higher, and therefore so will the cost to transit goods, and that gets passed on to consumers. The intent, I think, is more to cause economic hardship to Israel than it is to actually cause them any military damage. And it remains to be seen whether that succeeds or not.
And it seems in the past decade, the Strait of Hormuz was making headlines constantly as a point of tension in maritime security. Can you talk to us about the growing maritime tensions in the Middle East region, and now this waterway in the Red Sea as well?
Well, the Strait of Hormuz remains the priority and the biggest threat, because if this war expands, and that's one of the biggest threats to both Israel, the United States, and the region, is if this war expands beyond the Gaza Strip, whether that's some of the U.S. troops are being attacked in Syria, in Iraq, the risk of Hezbollah attacking into Israel in the north from Lebanon, or God forbid, if this should expand also to Iran. Of course, then you again have the Strait of Hormuz potentially coming into play, because that's much more than just some percentage of the global transit effect is trade. It's the energy lifeline that affects so many different countries, which could then affect the entire global economy if that goes up. And this war here that's between Hamas and Israel, obviously Israel was attacked by a terrorist strike on the 7th of October, and they have every right to respond to that. But they also have an obligation to international law, to the American people who are supporting them, that they cannot be seen as being cavalier with the lives of thousands of Palestinians who had nothing to do with it and are just as innocent as the Israeli civilians. And so this is the potential flashpoint that could expand this war in the region and draw others into it, that must be avoided at all costs.
Right. And the danger to the lives of so many American servicemen in that region as well. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on WION this morning.
And starting this broadcast with a continuous coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. Israel Defense Forces are continuing its large-scale airstrikes against Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip, as world leaders attempt to bring both parties back to the negotiating table. In the latest, according to a senior Hamas official, resuming talks with Israel on further exchanges of hostages and prisoners must be tied to a cessation of aggression and a ceasefire.
وفي ظل إعاقة الاحتلال التوصل إلى تمديد الهدنة الإنسانية واستئناف واستمرار العدوان النازي على شعبنا، فإننا نؤكد أن استئناف مفاوضات تبادل الأسرى مرهون بوقف العدوان ووقف إطلاق النار، وقبل ذلك لا حديث عنه.
Well, the Israeli military, on the other hand, says that it has intensified its attack on the Palestinian territory, adding that the militants on every part of the Strip are now on target. And this marks a big escalation in the Israeli offensive since the truce collapse. Before the 7-day pause, the deadliest Israeli operations were limited to northern Gaza.
צה"ל ממשיך ומרחיב את הפעולה הקרקעית מול מרכזי הכובד של חמאס בכל רצועת עזה. בכל רצועת עזה, במקום שיש מרכז כובד של חמאס, צה"ל פועל.
Now, Israel's military chief of staff says that the operation in southern Gaza will match its earlier offensive against Hamas in the northern part of the Strip as well. The IDF claims to have killed Hamas's commander of the Shati battalion with an airstrike in Gaza. They say that the commander, Haitham